Hey guys, this is going to be another one of the installments of Dialysis Abroad. Um, I realized again I didn't do one for Egypt either. I'm going to have to do one for Egypt and Kenya. So dialysis in Egypt. I am sitting in Lisbon, Portugal. It is a cold, rainy day in Lisbon. My hands are freezing, so I'm going to keep this one relatively quick because I'm not sure if there's much to even say about this one. When I made the decision to go to Cairo, the first time I went to Cairo was back in 2008. That was before the revolution, before I think Mubarak had been in power for like 30 years, some insane amount of time. Um, when I went the first time around, I had a kidney. I had to get a transplant. That transplant was out. It was dying. I knew the transplant was dying. I made the assumption that I had 7 months before all hell broke loose and I would require some life-saving measure of dialysis. I went anyway because I figured, well, they fired me in the hospital, and after being fired from my company in the hospital for being sick, they knew they were going to fire me before I went to the hospital because I told them I was sick, and they were like, yeah, let's try to not give him benefits that he's supposed to get. But it's a company, it's a corporation, they do what they do. Fired me in the hospital. I said, fuck it, I'm going, I'm traveling, I have money in the bank. And I didn't have to worry about getting treatments at that point. It wasn't necessarily a consideration. I was ill in Egypt the first time around. And in fact, I got so ill that I thought might have to even go back home and bail on the trip. Because I think I was sitting in Luxor contemplating my existence like, fuck, this is horrendous. There's no way I can keep going. But I got on a cruise and things started to improve, so I kept it going. But that time around, this consideration of treatments and all this other stuff didn't apply. It didn't matter. Not so much this time. So this time, these were considerations. And if I am being honest, I think I wonder what the hell would treatments be like in Egypt? Like, it actually concerned me, if I'm being honest. I don't know if I was being slightly racist on this. I suspect anything that you just come across for the very first time you're not necessarily sure of. And in this case, I had never been to a country in Africa to get treatments, if I'm being honest. So that's kind of where that fear came in. That said, that's not enough for me not to do it, because it's either get the treatment or you don't do the trip, in which case, you're kind of forced and compelled based on your own things that you want to do, the force of just your self-determination. I went through, I think it's called Egyptian Medical Services for the treatments. I think there were other places. What's happening, Wesley? I think there are other places that have treatments, but in this particular case, Egyptian Medical Services. First, the good. The treatments were perfectly fine. Like, even though I had concerns, you must understand the country is poor, so it's not it's different, slightly different, but the materials are relatively the same. The treatments are the same. Even the machines, for the most part, are relatively the same. And so I didn't sense any kind of lack of quality, nor did I feel bad at the end of the treatments or anything like that. They felt, for the most part, entirely the same as they were in the States. Your health starts to deteriorate pretty quickly if the treatments are not necessarily up to par, and in this case, as far as I could tell, they were perfectly up to par. So there's that. There were in two places. So the first place was in Cairo. The guy offers you teas. Now in the United States, they don't do that. In the United States, they don't like you eating or any of that stuff. The reality of it is, you eating is actually a benefit. There's medical research showing that it's a benefit. This thing of breaking down proteins or something in the body. So other countries feed you while you're on the machines. In this particular case, they gave tea and and sandwiches. Now, the funny part is, the guy that did the sandwiches, nice as can be, he offered me a smoke outside. That was the first time I've ever been offered a smoke outside of a Dialysis facility. It's fucking hilarious. But the Cairo facility is very chill and laid back. It's a really nice facility. Um, and like I said, the treatments are standard. I'm trying to think, is there anything else? The materials, yeah. So not as many plastics and stuff like that, but that's a different matter. Um, for the bad, it's Egypt. Now, I say that to say, in Egypt, everything is to some degree of a barter. And it's, if there is something that you need, meaning if you're in the desert and you need water, I'm going to charge you $50 for that water. They don't do it maliciously. They do it because they consider that they have something that you need, in which case they can rake you over the coals and rape you for it. This is, dialysis, unfortunately, is no different. The amount that dialysis costs in Egypt is what you would pay in, at least going through Egyptian medical services, what you would pay in a European country. It is nonsense. The price is utterly absurd. Like, there's, to put it in perspective, a treatment in Cairo is $80. A treatment in Cairo, I'm sorry, to keep it in Kenya, is $80. In Cairo, it's like $250. It's absurd. That price is utterly absurd. There is no reason why that should be that amount, and yet they have you over the coals. Now, the reason why the people are so nice to you when you're going to the facility is because they know they're fucking you royally. They're doing so with a smile, but they are doing so nonetheless. That's the bad part about this. You are getting hosed in regards to the treatments there. If you can find a treatment facility that's cheaper, do so. Do so. When I booked it, I fucked up with the booking, if I'm being honest. And kind of stuck at that point. Nevertheless, the one in Sharm el-Sheikh is interesting because they don't necessarily offer you sandwiches in Sharm el-Sheikh, but your view is amazing. You're sitting there looking off in the water. You're sitting there like looking off at the water, the way the thing is positioned. Again, just like the video in Portugal, your treatment is high quality. Your treatment is comparable to the end. If there's any question on whether or not, if you're on dialysis and you want to know whether or not it's safe to go, the answer is yes. Go. Figure out a way to get one for less. If you can, if you can't, fair enough. But go. There's no issue in this particular case with quality. There is no particular case where you should be fearful for your life. Oh my God, what am I going to expect? A nurse is a nurse is a nurse, even if they are there. The people who it gets this feeling that they you must understand. And I was trying to explain this to my mom. In economically weaker, in countries where the economics are weaker, meaning people are at the margins, where they're struggling. I've said before, morality is emergent. It's not one of those things that is just there. If you're in a situation where you're starving or you're barely making ends meet, you know, you got to do what you have to do in order to make ends meet for your kid. If you're a used car salesman and you know that this car is a lemon, you may feel all sorts of ways about selling that lemon, but if it's between you selling that lemon and your kid going hungry, you're going to sell the lemon and you're just going to feel bad about it, but you're going to feed your kid. It's the same quality from the standpoint in Egypt. They're living on the margins. That said, I don't want you to live on the margins at my expense or live high on the hog at my expense. But nevertheless, the quality of treatment, perfectly fine. I found no issue with the quality of treatments at all there. So if there's any question on whether or not you will be safe in going, I have no doubt. A nurse is a nurse is a nurse. Also, there is a fiscal incentive for them to make sure that you're okay, because if anything ever happened, that would be all over the news and it would kill any level of vacations for people who are going there for holiday treatments. You know, the irony of it is, I met a German cat there, and he was a German Egyptian. And he's cool, the most suavest man on the planet. And he's sitting there, and he's like smoking a cigarette after. He's like, and his legs are crossed, and he's dressed immaculately. And he looks at me, he says, he speaks English. Shocked the shit out of me. I didn't realize he spoke English. And he says, how much are you paying for this? Now, the very fact that you have to ask me how much I'm paying for this means that for the most part you're not paying for this. And he says, you know, my government covers this. My government in Germany covers this. And him and I start to have a conversation momentarily about the differences in treatments and the differences in the way Germany covers healthcare versus the way the United States covers healthcare. And people are left to fend for themselves, and how the system is, for the most part, unempathetic and leave people to their own devices to some degree. I mean, there's Medicare, but it puts people in perpetual debt. Medicare only covers 80% of the cost. If you're talking about $100,000 in hospital bills, what human being is going to be able to pay that in the United States? The majority of the people in the country can't pay a $400 bill if they get it, alone a $20,000 bill. And this is something where this kind of perpetual poverty that we allow people to be in just because the medical stuff isn't covered. It's not the case here. And clearly it wasn't the case with him, because he looked at me with a certain amount of shame or pity. I think it was more of pity if anything else. He just shook his head. It's like, dude, I agree with you. There's nothing I can do about it. We're fighting hard to try to make that not be the case. But for the good, healthcare is healthcare in this case. Egypt is just as good as anywhere else from the standpoint of treatments. I had no issue. The nurses were amazingly nice and amazingly competent at their jobs. Now, keep in mind, they don't necessarily always speak. Some of them do, and some of it's passable English, but ultimately when you're going there, it has to be very basic stuff that sometimes you're trying to communicate. Ultimately, the healthcare stuff is understood just because you've already given over the information that they need before you even got there. There's usually somebody there who speaks a little bit of English or some kind of passable in order to get to mind the gap, if you want to speak. But you're not necessarily going to have these long, drawn-out, intense conversation on, you know, existence and, you know, existentialism. It is going to be very basic in regards to the quality of conversations that you guys have. That's kind of just in Egypt. I mean, they don't necessarily speak a huge amount of English. But I was able to, there was no issues. And like I said, the people in Cairo was extraordinarily nice. The bad part about this was the cost. The bad part was the cost. Overpriced for where it is. So, and this one has gone too long. And I'm doing these because this wasn't something I necessarily usually bring up. But I bet. Fuck, this video is going too long. You know, when Bill Cosby, and I know Bill Cosby is a tarnished man and broken human being at this point, going to prison for rape all those years. But when Bill Cosby came on, the Cosby Show came on, an African-American doctor married to a lawyer as a wife. And the relationship between the two was immaculate. It was a beautiful portrayal of a relationship between these two professionals. College jumped. Like the participation in regards to African Americans in college spiked. That spiked because people could see that there was a positive icon on the television set that that looked like them, and that they could point to and say, hey, people do this. We're the way. This is not just others. It was a positive image, and that positive image had positive repercussions from the standpoint of the individuals who were in our society who were not necessarily who's treated and maligned and step fetch it and blackface and all this other stuff. This amelioration of a particular class of people over the course of the entirety of this country's history. Um, I consider this thing of the same thing with people who are, in medical assistants, dialysis. I wondered if the same thing is true. So it doesn't necessarily hurt to do this, and there may be some people who are considering traveling somewhere and may actually want to know this information. So I put it out there for whoever wants to know. All right, guys. I can't see the quotes because I'm on my cell phone, but I hope everyone is good. Thanks all.